Hello, I'm Microsoft MVP Tom Morgan. In this series of videos, we're talking about how to build declarative agents with API plugins for Microsoft Copilot. In this video, I want to show you a demo of the sort of thing you can do. So I was looking for something I could build, a nice demo project to kind of showcase some of this technology. And if you're like me, I find it a struggle getting dressed in the morning sometimes with knowing what clothes to wear. I quite often get lazy and I tend to put on the same kind of 10 pairs of clothes that have just been washed and are kind of at the front of the wardrobe, and I never really explore the other stuff, even though I know there's some good clothes in there, and I never really know what goes with other clothes and all the rest of it. And I was thinking maybe AI could solve this problem. And how would that work? Because the clothes I choose should be based on a couple of different things, right? They should be based on how cold it is outside and what the weather's doing, but also it should be based on what I'm doing that day. And that means what's on my calendar. And it also needs to be based around the clothes I actually own. It's no good having AI tell me to wear some clothes that I can't immediately go and put on. That's pointless, right? This is a task for a declarative agent with an API plugin. In fact, multiple APIs in this case. If we think about what this would look like, we've got our declarative agent, which is how the user is going to interact with our solution. The user is going to go to our declarative agent and start a conversation. The instruction in the declarative agent will be that its job is to talk about clothes and suggest and recommend clothes. In making those decisions, it needs to know that it needs to consider the weather, and it has access to a weather API. So we're going to tell it it's got access to a weather API, you need to use that. It's also got access to a calendar API, so it can get a schedule of activities. Using those two things, it ought to be able to get a good feel for what the user is doing and the kind of weather that they're going to be doing it in. And finally, a wardrobe API. So that's going to give access to what clothes are available. A combination of all those things should be enough to be able to recommend what to wear to the user. Crucially as well, if the user decides to go ahead and wear those particular clothes, then that should be an action on the declarative agent to come back to this API and send a post request back to this API here to update whatever backend system down here is powering this API to say, well, these clothes have been worn, so don't offer them up again for 10 days or something, because they need to be washed. You can't wear the same clothes again and again and again. That's an important part. So this is a good demo because it involves a couple of different APIs. It involves some posting as well as just gets, and it showcases a real experience. So I thought that would work really well. That's the process I put together. Did some cheating. I already had an API set up for the weather. I had that ready to go already, which was good. Calendaring, I found a little bit of an issue because I have a work calendar and I have a personal calendar, family calendar. I actually wrote an API abstraction to combine all those things together. Once I had that API abstraction, and we talked about this a little bit in the last video, I decided to use the API abstraction for everything. So I have ended up with a single API endpoint that's got several methods, one of which is to get the weather, one of which is to get the calendar activities, and one of which is to get the wardrobe. I didn't have a wardrobe API. You might not be surprised to know those things don't really exist, but I made one. I just had a very simple API that backs off to an Azure storage table. I just cataloged all my clothes over a weekend. Wasn't very interesting, but it's given me an API I can now use. That gave me everything I needed to put together into a declarative agent and a set of instructions. And we're going to go through the instructions in another video in the how to build out. But I just want to show you the output and what some of the output looks like. So I had all of the pieces of the puzzle and I was ready to create my new declarative agent, ClothesPilot. So ClothesPilot is the name I gave to it. And I committed to start this experiment where every day I would ask ClothesPilot what to wear, and whatever it told me, I would wear. And that was a bit of a risk, but we went with it, and it's worked out really well. So let me show you some screenshots. So this was the very first day of the experiment, and you can see it knows the weather, it's combined the weather, it's combined my activities for the day, and it's made a suggestion. It's done a really good job there. One of the things I could do as well is ask it to render an image of what I might look like when I was wearing these things, which it did for me. And I made a note of how I looked as well, so you can compare. This went on for a couple of days. So here's another day. And again, you can see it's you can see how it works. Like you can see it's combining this information. It's suggesting clothes based on the rationale around the weather and the activities, and it's working out really well. If you want to see more of these, I've got a blog post where I've put some examples, and then also if you go to my LinkedIn, every day I've done this. I've posted the chat transcript and also the rendered image and also the actual image, so you can kind of do a comparison of whether you think it's doing a good job. It hasn't all been plain sailing. There've been a couple of interesting days. There's been a bit of back and forth sometimes, but in general I've been really impressed with how it's worked. And I've had a couple of people say to me, actually, when I put it on LinkedIn, a couple of people have said this is a crazy idea. It's hilarious, but also I really want it, which is kind of really interesting because I find it's a crazy idea, but actually I'm finding it really interesting and really useful to have these clothing suggestions made for me. And it is really sort of changing how I access the clothes in my wardrobe, because I'm going for clothes that I wouldn't normally wear, and I like it. It's good. I've actually decided that even after this whole video series is over, I'm going to carry on using ClothesPilot to help me get dressed in the mornings. All right, that's enough for this video. In the next one, we're going to talk about exactly how you build something like this from scratch, and we're going to go through the process that I went through building ClothesPilot. Thanks for watching.